The paths from wrestling to MMA and vice versa are by now very well travelled, with the likes of Ken Shamrock, Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, Ronda Rousey, and others proving that it's possible to have stellar careers in both arenas. Not everyone can be a superstar in the squared circle and the octagon, however, and there are many wrestlers who dabbled in the shoot game either before or after their sports entertainment lives that perhaps didn't quite make the desired impression. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestlers you didn't know fought in MMA. Join us! Number 10, Kid Cash. You most likely remember Kid Cash as the Kid Rock cosplay high flyer from the dying days of ECW. A talented wrestler who had subsequent runs in TNA and WWE, Cash supposedly fancied himself a bit of a hard man and could be something of an explosive presence both backstage and between the ropes. With his in-ring career winding down, Cash decided to put his money where his mouth is. See what I did there? Money, cash, forget it, and stepped into the cage. His first fight took place in March of 2008 against Brian Brown, never heard of him either, at an amateur independent show in Kentucky. He lost via decision after being dominated and docked 3 points. 8 years later, the 47-year-old Cash decided to give it another go, declaring that his decision to throw down again was a personal test and that he wasn't motivated by money or had any illusions about going anywhere in MMA. Just as well then, because he was sparked out by his much younger opponent, the debuting Lindsey Jones, in just 39 seconds. Cha-ching! Number 9, Mitch. You remember Mitch, don't you? No, not Dean Ambrose's potted plant, you dickhead. I'm talking about Mitch, one of the members of the Spirit Squad that wasn't Dolph Ziggler or Kenny. Mitch's WWE run mainly consisted of him getting battered by D-Generation X and wrestling in the occasional multi-man match, such as the 5-on-2 handicap bout at Vengeance 2006 that saw him get battered by DX and then inducted into Triple H's special club after the fact. After getting literally shipped back to OVW in a giant box and subsequently released by WWE, Nick Mitchell decided to get over things by hanging out with then-girlfriend Tori Wilson and opening up a fashion boutique. He also spent time training in MMA and booked his first fight on a card in April 2010 against a debuting Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis, where have I heard that name before? Oh, you mean that Derek Lewis, the guy with the most knockouts in UFC heavyweight history? A top 10 worldwide ranked fighter? Oh boy! You can probably guess what the result was for the former cheerleader, can't you? To be fair, he did make a commendable 1 minute and 33 seconds into the second round before the ref stopped the contest. Number 8, Giant Silver. If I was over 7 feet tall and weighed close to 400 pounds, I would go around beating up everyone who looked at me cross-eyed. Getting paid for it would just be a bonus. Being big does not mean automatic success in MMA though, and many giants have found out the hard way that stature can be overcome by technique. Giant Silver, formerly of the Barmy Attitude Era stable The Oddities, knows this as well as anyone, as his early 2000s foray into the MMA world saw him get outmatched by men who were considerably smaller than him. Not though that it was without its highlights, believe it or not. Silver managed to take accomplished fighter Heath Herring into the third round during his debut fight at a Pride show and achieved victories over sumo wrestlers Henry Miller and Akabono. The big lad admitted that he didn't really have much MMA training and was just hoping to do his best while praying that his massive frame would guide him to the finish line, but defeats to the diminutive Ikehisa Manoa and the much smaller pro wrestler Takashi Sugiura proved that the freak show element would only carry Golga's mate so far. Number 7, Nathan Jones. Another big bad lad with a scary rep, Nathan Jones dipped his toes into the mixed martial arts world before he ever stepped foot in a WWE ring. The Colossus of Boggo Road had a pretty decent career as a strongman after leaving the Slammer, before realizing that there was more money in the burgeoning shoot-fight game. He received an offer from new promotion Pride to compete at their first ever event, sharing the bill with MMA legends like Kimo Leopoldo, Dan Severn, and the Gracies. His opponent on the show was disgraced former Yokozuna and controversial professional wrestler Koji Katao, fighting in his third and, as it turns out, final fight. His first 2 fights hadn't gone according to plan, and the third one against Jones looked to be going the same way, with Australia's strongest man snatching a guillotine choke and landing some nasty-looking knees. Koji was able to turn things around with relative ease, however, taking Jones down and gaining control before applying a key lock and securing the win via tap out in 2 minutes and 14 seconds of the first round. Number 6. Bam Bigelow. If I was 6'4", weighed close to 400 pounds and had flames tattooed on my actual skull, I would go around and beat up everyone who failed to hold the door open for me. Getting paid for it would just be a bonus. And Bam Bigelow was someone with potential as an MMA fighter. He was big, he was athletic, and having previously belonged to a biker gang and worked as a bouncer, not to mention his illustrious wrestling career, carried a sizable rep with him. Between leaving WWE and joining ECW, the Beast from the East ventured to the land of the rising sun to compete in his one and only professional fight. A frightening mismatch, Bama was put in against Chemo Leopoldo, who was much more experienced and, well, you know, an actual trained MMA fighter and all that. It's easy to see why Bigelow signed on, since he was paid 6 figures for the appearance. As for the fight itself, it lasted less than the entrances, resembled your typical grizzly bear attack, and ended with Chemo getting the submission win after 2 minutes and 15 seconds of the first round. Bam claimed afterwards that the whole thing was a work, but if it was, I don't think anyone gave Chemo the memo. Number 5. Batista. After leaving WWE in 2010, Batista announced his intentions to pursue a career in MMA. While some doubted his chances since he was in his 40s and had a lot of wear and tear on his body, the animal was probably quietly confident, having proved the naysayers wrong before when he became a wrestling megastar despite being in his mid-30s receiving the big push. The journey to get to the cage was a complicated one, as Big Dave initially agreed to a contract with Strikeforce only for the offer to get pulled after the company was bought. Then he got booked for CES MMA for a fight on October 6, 2012, only for his opponent to violate probation and end up back in jail just 5 days before it was due to go down. The former WWE champion still fought on that day though, with 40-fight veteran Vince Lucero drafted in as a replacement. Now, I'm no MMA purist or anything, but I thought the purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu looked very impressive, punching that human hot dog in the back of the head and getting a first-round victory via TKO. Number 4. Ludwig Borger. I've often thought that Ludwig Borger looked a little bit like an inflatable Brock Lesnar with a bit of the air taken out. The man behind Borger, Tony Harm, would have loved to have had a fraction of the success the Beast Incarnate enjoyed in both pro wrestling and MMA. Tony was a known hard nut, having a pre-wrestling career as a boxer back in his native Finland and known for finishing many a bar brawl. One reputation-enhancing incident saw him allegedly knock out the walking fridge freezer that is Scott Norton during a tour of New Japan, so you know he was no wimp with his fists. After retiring from pro wrestling, he fought for the rings and UFC promotions, though he found out that fighting in a cage was a lot different from throwing drunks through tavern windows. All told, Tony had 5 fights, winning his debut but losing the 4 that followed, most notably to UFC legend Randy Couture at UFC 13. None of the Helsinki Hellraisers fights made it out of the first round, though he enjoyed more success in the boxing ring, amassing a professional record of 13 wins and 6 losses. Number 3. Bart Gunn. Bart Gunn surprised many people when he went all the way and won WWE's disastrous Brawl for All tournament, beating Bob Holly, Steve Dr. Death Williams, and The Godfather on the way to demolishing Bradshaw in the final. After overcoming that list of absolute hosses, WWE rewarded Gunn by booking him against the professional boxer Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. Bodacious Bart lasted a whopping 35 seconds before a massive right hand sent his jaw to the moon, and he was gone from WWE soon after. He rebuilt his career in Japan in the years that followed, but still pined for real competition and decided to see what this MMA thing was all about after retiring from pro wrestling in 2004. In 2006, Gunn, fighting under his Japanese wrestling name Mike Barton, had 2 fights, stunning UFC veteran Wesley Cabbage Carrera with a first-round TKO victory in his debut. The next fight didn't go his way, but Gunn hardly embarrassed himself after surviving 2 rounds with Giant Killer Ikehisa Minoa, who had previously beaten Giant Silver, before losing via decision. A potential MMA rules rematch with Butterbean sadly fell apart during negotiations. Number 2. Chyna. When Chyna left WWE in 2001, she likely knew that her in-ring career was probably over, at least in America anyway. With ECW and WCW both gone and Vince McMahon's outfit really being the only game in town, Joni Laura took off for Japan, signing with Antonio Inoki and New Japan Pro Wrestling. This was a weird time for New Japan, as its founder and greatest star was in the process of seemingly killing off his creation by haphazardly getting its stars involved in the unpredictable world of MMA, with calamitous results. And that extended to Laura, though her situation was a lot more, controlled than others. That's because her MMA foray was on an Inoki-produced show, the dreadful August 8th, 2002 UFO event at the sparsely attended Tokyo Dome. Clearly done in order to hype her upcoming New Japan tour, Chyna came out and challenged anyone in the audience to fight her, with Golden Gloves boxing champion Chika Nakamura accepting. The two then had a clearly worked shoot boxing sort of wrestling match that Laura, won via TKO after some mounted punches. It wasn't a real fight, but the record books say that the ninth wonder of the world was undefeated in combat. Well, against people who aren't Joey Buttafuoco. Number 1, Santino Marella. Few wrestling characters have been as overwhelmingly comedic as Santino Marella. Though he started off as a serious wrestler in the Intercontinental title scene, he quickly began to play it all for laughs, which undoubtedly benefited him in the long run. Not afraid to make himself look the fool, Santino was about as far from an on-screen tough guy as you could get. I mean, his big move was putting on a friggin' snake puppet, for goodness sake. In reality, however, Anthony Corelli knew how to handle himself, having practiced judo and amateur wrestling through high school, which saw him win a couple of regional tournaments. Before signing with WWE and reporting to developmental territory OVW, Corelli worked for the Battle Arts promotion in Japan and had one official MMA bout in the country. I say official because Corelli himself would later claim to be 6-1 in the sport, but the only fight of his that's actually documented is his 26-second knockout loss to Takashi Ishino. And even that is hard to find about because Corelli did it under the name Joe Basco. Who knew MMA had generic name generators too?